Commander, Ilara's voice interrupted his thoughts. We've detected the source of the signal. It's coming from deep within the outer rim. It's on a collision course with our fleet. Zarek swallowed hard. The fear he had been trying to ignore was now fully realized. Something was coming. Something far worse than they had ever anticipated. This isn't over, Zarek muttered to himself, his voice filled with determination. Not by a long shot. The unexpected arrival. The tension in the Galactic fleet was palpable. After months of brutal war and immense loss, the fleet had finally defeated their enemies, but Zarek couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The victory felt hollow, as though something darker was approaching. The message from the outer rim haunted him, the mysterious signal warning of something huge and unfamiliar. As the fleet moved into formation, preparing for whatever might come next, Commander Zarek stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes fixed on the dark expanse of space. His mind was racing. He had led his people through countless battles. But this was different. They had just won, and now this new threat loomed, its exact nature still unknown. Ilara, standing next to him, was trying to calm her own nerves, but her hands shook as she worked at the console. The fear was growing, spreading like wildfire among the crew. They had seen destruction, they had seen death, but this was something new, an unknown enemy unlike anything they had ever faced before. Commander, Ilara spoke quietly, her voice tense. I've analyzed the signal. It's coming from deep within the outer rim, but there's something strange about it. The frequency. It's not like anything we've ever encountered. It's almost ancient. Zarek turned to her, his brow furrowing. Ancient? What do you mean? The signal has patterns that don't align with any known technology, sir. It's almost like it's been waiting. We don't know who or what it is, but the direction it's coming from, the sheer size, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered before. Zarek nodded slowly, the gravity of the situation settling in. They were no longer dealing with an enemy they understood. This was something entirely new, something alien, and more terrifying than any invasion they had fought. The fleet had just won, but the possibility of another, even more dangerous threat had emerged out of the dark. As the fleet continued on its course toward the outer rim, a sense of urgency filled the air. Everyone on board could feel it. This was no longer a simple victory march. They were heading into unknown territory, where the rules of engagement might not apply, and the enemy's strength was beyond comprehension. The crew prepared for battle, but they couldn't help but wonder. Were they walking into another ambush, or was something far worse waiting for them? A quiet alarm rang, pulling everyone's attention to the screen in front of Zarek. It was a new scan. Something had just appeared on their radar. The object was massive, far larger than anything the fleet had ever seen. The size alone was enough to make Zarek's stomach tighten. It's here, Zarek muttered under his breath. Whatever it is, it's arrived. The image on the screen was a dark shape, unlike any ship in the fleet's database. It didn't resemble anything from the known galaxy. It was a massive, shadowy form, like a black hole slowly emerging from the stars. The sensor data came back with chilling results. The ship was moving at incredible speed, far faster than anything the fleet could match. There was no time to react. Lieutenant, get a fix on it. I want full information now. Zarek barked. His mind raced through every possible scenario. Could this be the empire they'd fought in the past, returning stronger than ever? Or was this something worse? The sensor data continued to flood in, but it made no sense. There was no recognizable signature, no form of identification, just the feeling of something ancient and powerful approaching with unstoppable force. The mystery ship wasn't just a threat, it was a harbinger of something far more terrifying. Commander, Ilara spoke, her voice laced with disbelief. This ship, whatever it is, isn't showing any signs of weapons or life forms. It's completely silent, but it's heading straight for us at full speed. Zarek turned toward the window of the bridge, his eyes scanning the space outside. He could see it now, a giant shadow approaching rapidly, blocking out the stars. It was growing closer by the second. The silence on the bridge was thick. No one spoke. Everyone knew they were facing an unknown danger, but there was no way to prepare for something they couldn't even understand. "Get me a message to the fleet. We're entering a dangerous situation, but we don't have time for questions. All ships, prepare for emergency evasive maneuvers. If we don't know what we're up against, we'll need to be ready for anything." As Ilara sent the message, Zarek's mind continued to race. What could this ship be? Who was behind it? It was too late to turn back now. They had already entered the unknown, and the dark shadow growing larger outside the ship felt like the calm before a storm. But just as Zarek was about to issue another order, the unknown ship made its move. In an instant, it sent a pulse of energy toward the fleet. The entire ship shook violently as the blast hit, sending a jolt of terror through the crew. The bridge lights flickered. Systems went offline. Everyone scrambled to maintain control, their fear palpable. It was as though the ship had just announced its arrival. Unannounced, unstoppable, and terrifying. This was no ordinary enemy. This was a force beyond the fleet's comprehension. "Brace yourselves," Zarek shouted as the ship's alarms blared. "Whatever this is, it's here, and we need to be ready." As the Galactic Fleet's commanders prepared for a battle like no other, one thing was clear. They were no longer the only players in this galaxy. The dark force approaching was unlike anything they had faced before, and it was coming for them with a vengeance. The threat of Earth's dreadnoughts. As the unknown ship continued its ominous advance, the Galactic Fleet's officers scrambled to understand the nature of the threat they were facing. But as they analyzed the data, a chilling realization began to set in. They weren't just dealing with a mysterious enemy. They were facing an entirely new type of warfare, something humanity had never seen before. The massive shadow that had appeared out of nowhere was no longer a silent, distant threat. It was here. The energy pulse had shaken their ships to their core, sending shockwaves through the fleet's systems. Now they were facing an even more terrifying possibility. The unknown ship was not alone. "Commander, we've received new intel," Ilara reported, her voice filled with urgency. "The energy signature we've been tracking. It's coming from Earth's dreadnoughts. They're not just a myth, Commander. They've returned." Zarek's heart skipped a beat. Earth's dreadnoughts, their very name sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest commanders in the fleet. These warships were legends, said to be the most advanced and powerful military machines ever created. The fleet had only heard whispers of them. No one had seen them in centuries. Some had even thought they were long gone, relegated to the pages of history. But now, the legends were real. And they were coming straight for the Galactic Fleet. "What do we know about their current position?" Zarek asked, his voice tight. His mind raced, trying to piece together this sudden, horrifying revelation. Earth's dreadnoughts, an entire fleet, had arrived in their galaxy, and they were not here for peace. "Sir," Ilara responded, quickly scanning the data. "Their fleet is massive, Commander, and they're moving at incredible speed. It looks like they've been preparing for this moment for a long time. The energy we detected earlier wasn't just a warning shot. It was the beginning of something much bigger." Zarek turned to the viewport, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the approaching ship. The dark shape that had appeared earlier was just the beginning. The real threat, the dreadnoughts, were not far behind. Earth had somehow managed to amass an unstoppable force, and now it was headed straight for them. "How long until they reach us?" Zarek asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions building inside him. "At their current speed," Ilara responded, tapping her console. "They'll be in range within the hour. And there's no mistaking it. These ships are not here to negotiate. Their weapon systems are fully active, Commander. We're looking at an all-out war." Zarek stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling heavily on him. The Galactic fleet had won many battles, had pushed back countless invaders, but Earth's dreadnoughts were something else. Their size alone was enough to make even the bravest warrior hesitate. Their technology, their weaponry, it was all far beyond what the fleet had ever encountered. "We've faced wars before," Zarek said, breaking the silence, his voice firm. "But this is different. We need to prepare for the worst." Ilara nodded, her expression grim. "Sir, the fleet is already on high alert. We're rerouting resources, reinforcing shields, and preparing all defensive measures. But I don't think we're prepared for something of this magnitude. These ships, they're not just technologically advanced. They're built for annihilation." Zarek paced back and forth, his mind racing. Earth's dreadnoughts weren't like anything they'd ever seen. They weren't just powerful. They were designed to be the last word in warfare. A force so overwhelming that it could wipe out entire fleets with little effort. The fleet had once been invincible, had celebrated victory. But now the scales were tipped, and the true test of their strength was about to begin. "Send a message to the rest of the fleet," Zarek ordered. "Tell them to brace for impact. This is not just an enemy fleet. We're facing Earth's finest, and they won't stop until they've taken control." As Ilara sent the message, Zarek couldn't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Earth had always been a distant memory, a planet that had once sent humans into the galaxy. But now, their warships had returned, and they weren't here to talk. Earth was once again a force to be reckoned with. "This is it," Zarek muttered to himself. "We're about to face the greatest challenge of our lives." As the fleet's commanders rushed to prepare their ships for battle, Zarek's mind was filled with questions. What did Earth want? Why had they returned after so many centuries? And most importantly, how could the Galactic fleet possibly stand against such a powerful foe? The clock was ticking, and the tension in the air was suffocating. The galaxy, which had just been at peace, was now on the brink of another war, one that could decide the future of all civilizations. Zarek took a deep breath and turned to face his crew. The battle that was about to unfold would define them all. "Prepare for battle," he said, his voice unyielding. "We fight for the galaxy. We fight for our future. And we fight for the memory of those who came before us." The battle begins. The tension in the Galactic fleet was suffocating. The entire fleet had gone into full battle mode, readying their weapons and shields as the threat of Earth's dreadnoughts loomed larger with every passing moment. The fleet's commanders stood at their posts, watching the mysterious ships grow closer. The ships were massive, their dark forms casting a shadow over the entire galaxy. There was no going back now. The battle had begun. Zarek paced in front of the command center, his eyes locked on the viewport. The distant stars were now obscured by the advancing fleet of Earth's dreadnoughts. The sheer size of the enemy armada was overwhelming. There were dozens of them, each one larger than the most powerful ships in the Galactic fleet's arsenal. They looked like giants in space, silent and unyielding. "Commander," Ilara spoke up, her voice tense. "The first wave is almost in range. They're preparing to fire." Zarek's heart pounded in his chest as he took a deep breath. The calm before the storm was over. Earth's dreadnoughts weren't just here to intimidate. They were here to destroy. "Raise shields," Zarek ordered, his voice steady but with an edge of urgency. "Prepare to engage. All ships, form defensive positions." The fleet's ships shifted into position, their shields flickering to life, glowing with a soft blue light as they readied their weapons. Zarek's eyes never left the viewport as the first volley of energy blasts erupted from the enemy ships. The explosions rocked the fleet, sending shockwaves through space. The force of the blasts was so powerful that the flagship itself shook violently, throwing Zarek off balance. "Report," Zarek barked, trying to regain his footing. "Shields at 70%, Commander." Ilara replied quickly. "We've taken a direct hit, but we're holding steady. Returning fire now." The fleet's weapons fired back, brilliant energy beams lighting up the dark expanse of space. But even as their weapons lit up the sky, it was clear the enemy dreadnoughts were far more advanced. Their shields absorbed the blasts with ease, and they continued their relentless assault. The Galactic fleet's ships were powerful, but they were outmatched in both size and strength. "We can't keep this up," Ilara said, her voice strained. "Their firepower is overwhelming." Zarek's mind raced. He had prepared for many kinds of battles, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The dreadnoughts' weapons were not just advanced. They were designed to obliterate entire fleets in seconds. The energy pulses they sent out had the power to tear through entire warships, as if they were made of paper. "Focus on evasion," Zarek shouted. "We need to buy time and regroup. All ships, avoid direct combat unless absolutely necessary. Get as close to the outer rim as possible." The fleet's ships began to scatter, trying to avoid the full brunt of the enemy's fire. They moved in unpredictable patterns, desperately trying to dodge the dreadnoughts' powerful energy blasts. But even as they evaded, the massive ships continued their assault, forcing the fleet into a retreat. The pressure was mounting, and the sense of urgency on the bridge was palpable. "Commander," Ilara said, her voice tight with worry, "we've lost contact with 2 of our ships. They've been completely destroyed." Zarek's heart sank. The losses were already mounting, and they hadn't even begun to scratch the surface of the enemy's full power. Earth's dreadnoughts weren't just overwhelming. They were calculating, precise, and ruthless. "Send word to the fleet," Zarek ordered. "Tell them to hold on. We need to stall for time. Our backup is on the way." Ilara hesitated for a moment. "But sir, our backup. We don't know if it will arrive in time." Zarek turned to face her, his expression hardening. "We don't have a choice. We fight until we can fight no more. This is our galaxy, and we will not give it up without a fight." As Zarek finished speaking, the situation on the battlefield only grew worse. The dreadnoughts were relentless, cutting through the fleet's defenses with ease. Each blast they fired ripped through the stars, leaving streaks of fiery destruction in their wake. One of the fleet's ships, the SS Aurora, was struck directly by a beam of energy, splitting it in half. The once proud ship was reduced to debris, scattering across space like shattered glass. Zarek felt a cold, heavy weight settle in his chest. Each lost ship represented not just a vessel, but the lives of brave men and women who had fought to protect the galaxy. The pain of each loss was something Zarek had learned to bear over the years, but it never got easier. And now, as Earth's dreadnoughts rained destruction on the fleet, the reality of the situation became clear. This wasn't just a battle for the galaxy's future, it was a fight for survival. "Commander, we got incoming," Ilara shouted. "The dreadnoughts are launching smaller ships. They're going to board us." Zarek's eyes widened. The threat was now even more immediate. Earth wasn't just firing from a distance. They were planning to board their ships, invade their very decks. If they got close enough, the fleet's remaining forces would be overrun by overwhelming numbers. "Prepare for close combat," Zarek ordered. "Activate internal defenses. Deploy all available forces to repel boarders. We cannot let them breach our ships." The sound of heavy boots running down the corridors filled the ship as soldiers and crew members rushed to their posts. The battle had gone from a distant threat in space to a fight for survival within the very heart of their flagship. Zarek stood at the command center, watching as the fleet struggled to hold its ground. Earth's dreadnoughts were everywhere, and their power seemed unstoppable. The stakes had never been higher. If the fleet couldn't find a way to fight back, the galaxy's future would be lost. "All hands, brace yourselves," Zarek said, his voice grim but determined. "The real fight is just beginning." A plan in motion. The battle was far from over. As Earth's dreadnoughts continued their relentless assault, the Galactic fleet's officers fought desperately to maintain control. Zarek stood at the helm of the flagship, trying to stay focused despite the mounting chaos around him. His crew was exhausted, but they couldn't afford to stop. Every second counted, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. "Commander," Ilara said, her voice strained, "we've lost another 2 ships. The dreadnoughts' boarding parties are getting closer. We're running out of time." Zarek's heart clenched. They had held on longer than anyone expected, but the losses were stacking up. The fleet's defenses were buckling under the sheer might of the enemy, and Earth's warships weren't relenting. It was becoming clear that if they didn't change their tactics soon, the entire fleet would be wiped out. But then, as if a spark of hope had ignited in the darkest of moments, a thought crossed Zarek's mind. A plan. An extremely risky one, but their only chance at survival. The fleet had a weapon, one so powerful it could change the course of the battle. It had been kept secret for centuries, hidden in the deepest vaults of their strongest ships, and never used before. But now, it might be their only hope. "Ilara, prep the Galactic Reclaimer. It's time to deploy the secret weapon," Zarek ordered. Ilara blinked in disbelief. "Commander, are you sure? That weapon. It's never been tested. We don't know if it will even work, let alone against these dreadnoughts." Zarek's eyes hardened, and he took a slow, steady breath. "We don't have a choice. The dreadnoughts are tearing us apart. We need to take a risk. This is our last shot at turning the tide." Ilara hesitated, but she knew there was no arguing with Zarek's decision. The Galactic Reclaimer, a long-forgotten weapon developed in the early days of the fleet, was the galaxy's most powerful energy-based weapon. Its full potential had never been realized, until now. "Understood, Commander," Ilara replied, her voice firm despite the fear that crept into her chest. She quickly turned to her console, typing in the coordinates and initiating the launch sequence, launching in 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Zarek stood by, his eyes never leaving the viewport. He could see the dreadnoughts closing in on them. Every blast, every impact made the ship tremble. Earth's forces were systematically breaking down their defenses, and the fleet's remaining ships were scattering, trying to avoid being obliterated by the constant bombardment. "Commander," came the voice of the fleet's tactical officer, Lieutenant Cade. "The enemy is expecting a full retreat. They're not prepared for a counterattack. We might have a chance to hit them hard while they're distracted." Zarek turned to Cade. "Perfect. We'll hit them where it hurts. Ilara, once the Galactic Reclaimer is online, have the fleet's remaining ships position themselves for a direct assault. We're going to hit them with everything we've got. Hard and fast." Ilara nodded, her fingers flying over her console. "Understood. Initiating maneuver. Deploying the fleet to combat positions now." As the fleet regrouped and prepared for the attack, Zarek could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The Galactic Reclaimer wasn't a guaranteed victory. In fact, it was a last-ditch effort, a weapon of desperation. But it was their only hope. If the fleet could hit the dreadnoughts at their weakest point, maybe, just maybe, they could turn the battle around. The 5 minutes felt like an eternity as the countdown continued. Zarek's mind raced through all the possible outcomes, but the one thing he couldn't ignore was the raw, terrifying power of the dreadnoughts. They had already devastated their forces, and the chances of survival were slim. But with this weapon, with the Reclaimer, they had a chance. "Launch in 1 minute." Ilara's voice broke through his thoughts. The fleet's remaining ships were now in position. The tension on the bridge was so thick it could almost be cut with a knife. Everyone knew that once the Galactic Reclaimer was launched, there would be no turning back. The weapon would either save them, or it would fail, and their chances of survival would be lost. Zarek turned to Ilara, his eyes filled with a grim determination. "When that weapon fires, we need to make sure we're ready. No second chances." Ilara nodded, her face set with resolve. "Understood, sir." A long silence followed as the countdown continued. The crew was tense, but there was no time for fear. They had made it this far, and now they had one final chance to turn the tide of the battle. Firing in 3, 2, 1. Ilara's voice echoed through the bridge as the massive weapon roared to life. The Galactic Reclaimer fired a concentrated beam of energy directly at the nearest dreadnought, the force of the blast sending a shockwave across the battlefield. The sheer power of the weapon tore through the dreadnought's shields, ripping them apart like paper. For a moment, the entire battlefield was bathed in a blinding light as the energy beam struck its target. Zarek held his breath as the dust of the battlefield settled, waiting to see the outcome. Would the Galactic Reclaimer work? Had they finally found the edge they needed to defeat the Earth dreadnoughts? The answer came moments later, as the massive dreadnought began to break apart. Its once imposing form crumbled under the weight of the weapon's power, and a massive explosion engulfed the ship. The shockwaves spread out, destroying nearby dreadnoughts and sending debris flying into space. "We did it," Ilara exclaimed. The Reclaimer worked. One dreadnought down. Zarek's heart raced as he watched the first victory of the battle unfold. They had taken down one of the dreadnoughts, but there were still many more left. The fight wasn't over, but the Galactic fleet had just been given a fighting chance. For the first time in a long while, Zarek allowed himself a small glimmer of hope. "We keep going," he said, his voice determined. "This isn't over. Not yet." The unexpected twist. The victory that had come so suddenly seemed almost too good to be true. The Galactic Reclaimer had struck a devastating blow against Earth's dreadnoughts, tearing through their massive warships with shocking ease. The entire battlefield had lit up in a blinding flash of light as the weapon's beam hit its target, and the shockwaves had been felt all across the fleet. The first dreadnought had been destroyed, but there were still more to come. "Commander," Ilara's voice crackled through the tense silence on the bridge. "We've taken down one of the dreadnoughts, but the rest of the fleet is still advancing. They're not retreating. They're coming in stronger now. They've reorganized their forces." Zarek's heart sank. It had been a brief moment of triumph, but it was clear that Earth's fleet wasn't going to go down easily. The dreadnoughts had more tricks up their sleeves. They had been tested in the crucible of war for years. What could they be planning next? "Get me a status on the remaining dreadnoughts," Zarek ordered, his voice steely with determination. "I want a full analysis. What's their next move?" Ilara quickly scanned the data, her fingers moving rapidly over the console. "The remaining dreadnoughts have adjusted their formation. They're moving faster now, coordinating their attacks more efficiently. And Commander, there's something strange. They're emitting an unusual frequency. I think they're trying to do something to our shields." Zarek's instincts went on high alert. The Galactic fleet had been prepared for a direct fight. But this was different. Earth's ships weren't just attacking. They were actively trying to neutralize their defenses. The thought of their shields failing was enough to freeze Zarek's blood. "Is there anything we can do?" Zarek asked, his voice tight. "I'm working on it, Commander," Ilara replied. "But these frequencies, they're disrupting our shield generators. We can't maintain our defenses if we don't stop this." Zarek's mind raced. The Galactic fleet was barely holding its ground, and now it was facing an even more insidious threat. The dreadnoughts weren't just trying to destroy their ships, they were attempting to disable them. Without shields, the fleet would be utterly vulnerable to Earth's devastating firepower. "Is the Reclaimer ready for another shot?" Zarek asked, his voice edged with urgency. Ilara quickly checked the status of the weapon. "We have enough power for one more shot, but it'll take time to recharge. We can't afford to wait too long." Zarek's mind raced. They had used their trump card once, but it wasn't enough to finish the fight. If Earth's dreadnoughts disabled their... But even as hope began to rise, Zarek couldn't shake the unease in the back of his mind. The Xanthion were powerful, but could they be trusted? What had brought them into the fray at this moment of all times? "Ilara, how much longer until we can use the Galactic Reclaimer again?" Zarek asked, his voice tinged with concern. "It'll be ready in a few minutes, Commander," she replied. "But by then, we may have to contend with even more advanced tactics from the dreadnoughts. They're not just trying to destroy us. They're adapting. We've got to act fast. Zarek's eyes narrowed as he gazed at the incoming Xanthian fleet on the sensors. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to entertain the idea of victory. But there were still so many unknowns. The dreadnoughts weren't going to give up easily, and the Xanthian had yet to prove their worth. Prepare for the final assault, Zarek ordered. When the reclaimer is ready, we'll strike again. But this time, we'll do it together, with the Xanthian by our side. The final confrontation. The battlefield had shifted. The arrival of the Xanthian Confederacy fleet had brought a glimmer of hope to the Galactic fleet. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Zarek allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. The dreadnoughts had been knocked off balance, their advance slowed by the unexpected arrival of this new force. But even so, the war was far from won. As the Xanthian fleet closed in, their ships cutting through the stars with unparalleled speed, Zarek watched with a mixture of awe and caution. The Xanthian ships were massive, gleaming, sleek, and terrifyingly advanced. They didn't just match the dreadnoughts in power, they surpassed them. Each ship seemed to hum with untapped energy, a testament to the advanced technology that had once been a legend among the galaxy's oldest civilizations. "Commander," Ilara said, her voice steady but full of anticipation, "the Xanthian fleet is in position. They're preparing to engage." Zarek nodded, his mind sharp as ever. The dreadnoughts were still formidable, but with the help of the Xanthian, they finally had a fighting chance. He wasn't about to let this opportunity slip through their fingers. "Alert the fleet," Zarek ordered. "We fight together. We push back the dreadnoughts now. Our survival depends on it." As the fleet formed up alongside the Xanthian ships, a strange silence fell over the command center. The tension was thick. This was it, the final confrontation. The Galactic fleet and the Xanthian Confederacy would either stand victorious together, or they would fall. "Ready the Galactic reclaimer," Zarek continued, his voice steady but commanding. "We use it when the moment is right." The fleets moved into position, and for the first time since the battle began, the dreadnoughts seemed to falter. They weren't used to facing an adversary that could match their might. The Xanthians' weapon systems activated, sending powerful energy blasts that tore through the void, directly striking the dreadnought shields. But the dreadnoughts were not ones to give up easily. As they regrouped, they launched a counterattack, this time not just with firepower, but with overwhelming force. Smaller, faster ships swarmed toward the Xanthian and Galactic fleets, determined to break through their lines. The sound of spaceborne weaponry echoed as the battle raged on, the cosmos around them alive with bursts of energy. Zarek's eyes were fixed on the chaos unfolding in front of him. The Galactic fleet and the Xanthian were holding their ground, but Earth's dreadnoughts were relentless. The tide could turn at any moment, and they had no choice but to push forward. "Now," Zarek shouted, his heart pounding. "Fire the Galactic reclaimer." The immense weapon fired once more, a brilliant beam of energy that cut through the battlefield like a lightning strike. It struck the largest of the dreadnoughts, tearing through its defenses with a force that could only be described as cataclysmic. For a moment, the entire galaxy seemed to light up as the dreadnought's shields shattered, and the ship itself began to collapse under the weight of the reclaimer's power. But just as victory seemed within reach, something unexpected happened. A surge of energy erupted from the dreadnought's remaining fleet, a wave of distortion that seemed to tear apart the fabric of space itself. The remaining dreadnoughts retaliated with a final, desperate assault. This attack wasn't just physical. It was a last-ditch effort to tear down the fleets with an energy surge that threatened to disable every ship in range. Ilara's voice rang out, sharp with alarm. "Commander, their energy levels are spiking. They're going to fire something massive, something worse than anything we've faced yet." Zarek's stomach dropped as he watched the dreadnoughts gather their final reserves. The weapon they were preparing wasn't just a blast. It was an extinction-level weapon designed to wipe out entire fleets in one strike. He could feel the pressure mounting, the imminent danger closing in. We can't let them fire that weapon. Zarek muttered to himself, a cold realization settling in. We need to stop it now. Without a moment to lose, Zarek made a bold decision. Ilara, power up the secondary defense grid. We're going to intercept that blast. We have to stop them, no matter the cost. Commander. Ilara protested, her eyes wide with shock. That's too dangerous. The secondary grid isn't designed to withstand an attack of that magnitude. But Zarek's mind was already made up. We don't have a choice. In that moment, Zarek understood. The battle wasn't just about firepower. It was about resilience, about fighting for the galaxy's future, no matter the odds. He had led his fleet through countless trials. But this was the final test. They either stopped Earth's dreadnoughts here and now, or they would fall, and the galaxy would fall with them. With every ounce of energy the Galactic fleet had left, the secondary defense grid powered up. The entire fleet was focused, holding their breath as the energy of the impending blast surged toward them. The wave of destruction came crashing toward the fleets in a blinding pulse of light. But just before it hit, the Galactic fleet's defense grid activated, creating a shimmering barrier around the ships. The blast collided with the shields, and for a split second, it seemed like time itself had stopped. The entire fleet shook under the strain as the shields held strong, deflecting the worst of the energy. It was working. But it wasn't enough to stop the energy completely. The barrier was holding, but the strain was almost unbearable. Zarek knew they couldn't last much longer. Then, at the critical moment, the Xanthian fleet made their final move. With a coordinated strike, they launched their own weapon, a devastating energy wave that sliced through the dreadnoughts' remaining ships. The power of the blast overwhelmed the enemy forces, and the dreadnoughts' once dominant fleet crumbled, their ships falling into ruin. Silence followed the devastation. The galaxy, once again, felt the weight of peace descending. Zarek looked out across the battlefield. The Xanthian had saved them, but it had cost them dearly. The Galactic fleet had fought with every ounce of their being, and they had survived, together. Victory, Zarek said softly, his voice filled with exhaustion. But at what cost? The final confrontation had ended, and the dreadnoughts had been defeated. But the scars of the battle would remain. The future was uncertain, but for now, the galaxy was safe. The Galactic fleet had held its ground, and with the help of the Xanthian Confederacy, they had secured their survival.